Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing my June and July reading wrap up because I realized I forgot to do one for June, so let's get into it. I read 30 books across the last 2 months because I was in desperate need of finishing my yearly reading goal. I know what you're thinking, like, Rebecca, it's summer, WTF. Well, I got off to such a hot start that I decided I would love to just be done with it by the end of July and then just use the rest of the year to like do whatever I want reading wise and not feel any kind of like, guilt's the wrong word, maybe pressure to hit the goal. And so since I was already on such a kickstart of it all, I was like, let me just knock it out. And I did. And I'm a little proud of myself for it, I won't lie. But now I'm in the biggest reading slump ever, and it's because I forced it to happen too fast. So take that for what you will. So let's dive into the books that I read. I initially was like, oh, let me just do the ones that were just 4 and 5 star. Well, that was 27 of the 30 because I have been very good about DNFing books I'm not interested in this year, which is great for my reading life, not so great when I'm coming in here to do a wrap up. So what we're gonna do instead, I'm gonna show you all of the June books right here. Pause for editing, Rebecca. And then let's talk about my favorites from the month, okay? So, Chelsea Curto. We love her around here. She's excellent. She is a indie author who I've only experienced her hockey series, but I know she has some other books that I would love to check out once I am caught up on this series, but she also just started another one, and so a lot is happening, but her stuff is so good. I gave Face Off 4.5 stars. This was the second book that I had read in the month, and I had such a fun time. We follow Maverick and Emmy, who, after a chance meeting where Maverick basically hits on her the whole time, not realizing that she's his new teammate, and she gives it back to him so well, like in all of her banter. She is not mean to him, but she's mean to him, you know what I mean? And her being mean to him turns him on. So he's like, yes, I'm gonna banter with this girl all the time, and I'm totally gonna get her to sleep with me. And she's like, we're not doing that. That's not happening. Because she is I don't know that she's the first female professional player in the NHL. Again, this is fiction, so like obviously there aren't any female players in the NHL. And Chelsea wrote this like really great excerpt about that in the beginning of the book before it started, talking about how she's like, this is a work of fiction. I'm an actual hockey fan. Like obviously I know this is not a thing, but I wanted to write the story, so I did, and it went so well. I'm so glad she did that. They had the best chemistry in addition to the banter. Sometimes the banter is so good, and then you get to them actually being together, and you're like, there was just so much buildup for nothing. But that did not happen in this case. I absolutely love the two of them. Emmy has a really hard time letting people in and letting them take care of her for reasons we find out as the book goes on. And Mav spends the whole time trying to show her that he's not just this playboy. He ends up being just this sweet little marshmallow of a man while also willingly beating the shit out of someone when they deserved it. So, you know, a nice sweet and spicy, if you will. The pacing of this was great. I loved the found family aspects of it. Getting to see the rest of the team rally around Emmy as well was fantastic. I'm excited to see what else comes of this series. Chelsea's definitely gearing us up for quite a ride. And then after that, I read another hockey series that I enjoy by Brittany Nicole, The Revenge Games. It was number 3. This is a major puck up. This, I rated 5 stars initially, but I feel like that was too much. And I enjoyed my time with the characters, but when I think back on execution, and actually when I really think about the execution of the marketing of this book, it makes me want to dock the book. But it's not the book's fault that it was not marketed correctly. Here's what I mean. If you've been on Instagram at all and you are at all into hockey romance, you have seen the reels and snippets for this book in her posts, and she talks about how it's a single dad, a forbidden romance, age gap, all of those things. The single dad part of it all doesn't show up until halfway, if not more, through the book. So much so to the point where my friend and I were texting and we were like, this was supposed to be a single dad romance, right? Like, we're not, are we misremembering? Are we mixing this up with another book? And then we looked back on her Instagram and sure enough, it's marketed as that. And I was like, single dad where? There's no child. At least not one that is his and that we haven't already met before. It was that part wasn't done so well. I also really struggled with the timeline. There was a lot of back and forth dual timeline situation with the couple, and they haven't been together very long when we first meet them. So it was very confusing. And I felt like we needed a better physical delineation in the ebook to tell us that we were in the past, because I would get through part of it and be like, okay, but they're in Paris right now. So like, are they still in Paris? Is this a time before? how did we get here? And it was just kind of confusing. Now, the actual execution of the romance and the relationship was done pretty well. The tension was there. The stakes were definitely there. This is a dad's best friend, also in addition to the single dad romance. And I think generally speaking, that part was handled as expected. The concerns about, you know, her dad's best friend, her boyfriend, wants to tell her dad like pretty immediately, honestly, and she's like, I'm not ready yet. And she also has her own stuff going on with her dad and her new stepmom, and it's like a whole thing. And it sounds icky when you say it out loud like that, but it wasn't very icky, actually. I didn't hate it, which is weird for me, kind of, but not, because I read some age gap, but I've been more into the age gap where like she's 30 and he's like 50 or 60, because then it's like maybe more so 50, but then it's like, okay, you've had time as a full adult and your brain's done cooking, and you know, all the things that we tend to go ick about age gaps. This one, she is younger, but so I don't know. I feel like I didn't really give you a really great explanation of why this didn't work for me, but I also feel like if I go any deeper, I'm just gonna start spoiling things, and that's not cool. So we're gonna move ahead. Ooh, okay, actually, to a age gap romance that has that gap I was talking about, Silver Fox, Kayla Gross. This is a novella. This is her third one, I believe, and it's the first one where I read it and was like, yeah, no notes. No notes about the novella. The only note that I had at the end was, I wish this was longer, which is a great note to have when you finish a novella. This follows, I don't remember their names. Let's see. Elijah is the guy's name, and in the synopsis, there is no mention of this girl's name. I hate when they do that. I don't know her name. I can't remember. This was a month and a half ago. But Elijah's like 45, 47, and she's like 32. We love it. We love to see it. If you're going to do an age gap, do that. They end up at a cabin or Airbnb situation together. It's her family's rental property or vacation property, and she plans to go up there. I think her mom's like, oh yeah, you should go up there, because she's kind of going through a little bit of a time. She's like, I just want to go relax and, you know, be in nature. There's like a beach nearby. Like, she just wants to have a chill weekend. Her dad tells him to go up. He works for her dad, and her dad's like, you need to relax. You need to not work over the weekend. You need to touch some grass, see some sun, do the thing. Here are the keys. No one's going to be up there. Have a great weekend. They run into each other the first night. It's a thing. There's chemistry, but they're both like, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were going to be up here. I'll just go to my room. I won't bother you. It's fine. And he's like, no, you were here first. You're fine. It's not a big deal. And she's like, well, I'm making dinner. Do you want some? They eat together, and then they just kind of go their separate ways initially. But the chemistry is palpable. And so she puts out online. She's like, hey, it's a weekend. Let's have a weekend together. We're adults. We're consenting. We would like to have some fun. He's like, okay, cool. I'm in. And then things go off from there. There are the expected challenges that you would have. It was a spicy, steamy, good time. And I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed that the age gap wasn't creepy. So there's that. And then I went on a mystery thriller kick and then into the dark romance rabbit hole. So let's start with mystery thriller. I read If Something Happens to Me by Alex Finley over audio. Gave this 4.5 stars. Had the best time. I think I talked about this in the last vlog that I did, so I don't want to go too far into it, but there's this guy, Ryan Richardson. He has a terrible night. It says a car door ripping open, crushing blow to his head, and his hands yank him from the vehicle, and then his girlfriend screams and she's taken. There's no trace of his girlfriend, the car. He has no idea what's going on, and there's a suspicion over him. When we enter the book, he is on some trip in, I think, Italy with his college. For college, it's I think a summer abroad trip, and he's with a group of students. And he gets this note of, hey, I know who you are. They know who I am. We need to talk. And the they in this are the people who took Allie. And he's debating whether or not to meet this person. And he ends up doing that. And his girlfriend is also with him. Not Allie, his high school girlfriend who was ripped away from him all these years, but his college girlfriend. And she's kind of helping him along the way, but doesn't know really the full story. And then he eventually tells her. And it's interesting to watch her try to support him through this while he is also still being like super secretive and dealing with everything. I think this is handled so well. His college friends are like, hi, we know, we actually know, so like let us help you. And watching him accept their support and then also deal with something so scary was the lifeline I needed through this story, because I wasn't actually in the mood for like an intense psychological thriller, and this felt like it was going there initially. Fortunately, it didn't. But when it was happening, I was like, ooh, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. And then the support comes through and you're like, oh, I can do this. The audiobook narration is great, but so is the pacing. I blew through this in an afternoon. It was so good. I don't want to say much more because the friend thing is like a light spoiler, so I won't say anything else, but it's a good time. And if you need a lifeline as you're reading it, mentally go, the friends are going to come through. And you'll be fine. After that, I read Listen for the Lie, which I also gave 4.5 stars. I did talk about this in this last vlog, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. I actually did not love the audiobook for this and wish I had read it entirely physically. But because I had a bunch of stuff going on at the time, I listened to the audio. So I will say, if you're thinking about this one, maybe skip the audio or be willing to like grin and bear it through the podcast parts. The audio choices there didn't really work for me. But I'm also a person who does not listen at one time speed to my audiobooks. It might have sounded okay on that, so do with that what you will. This is about Lucy, who is under the suspicion of murder for her best friend, but the police never found anything tying her to it. She was never, I don't know that she was never arrested for it. She might have been arrested initially, which like never went to trial, the whole thing. Everyone in town thinks that she killed her best friend, Savvy. Lucy has no recollection of this night. She wakes up covered in blood, splitting headache, is at the hospital later, and they're like, yeah, you have the mother of all concussions, like you're not okay. And she's trying to like piece things together all these years later when she's back in Texas for her grandma's like 85th birthday or something. Great story. I didn't initially see like the who did it coming, but eventually, even when I did, the execution of everything else was done super well, and I had a good time. After this, I went into a little dark romance time, and I read the Alliance series by S.J. Tilley. Early in the year, I read Dom, which is the third book in the series, and I kept telling myself, you need to go back and read the rest of them. Partly because I wanted to read Hans, the fourth book, which had come out not long after I had read Dom, actually, but I was like, you know what? I will go back and read all of them instead of ignoring the first two. I had an okay time with Nero. That one had a lot of exposition, a lot of setup, and it just didn't flow the way the rest of them did, but by the end of it, Nero is down bad for his girl, and that's all that really matters. It's a fun time if you can let go of the initial kind of stumbling to get things set up. King was way more, I don't know, they're all manipulative, but that one in particular, they have a bad night after he finds out his sister's husband is cheating on her. They find out because the girl he's cheating with is friends with the girl that his sister's friends with. They end up at said girl's house because she's recovering from a surgery. And his sister and him are sitting on the couch talking to this girl. Her sister's husband walks in with the other girl on his arm. It's a whole thing. Takes care of the husband. And unfortunately, the girl he was cheating with has walked upon the scene because she was going to what would now be her ex-boyfriend's place because she was not being with a cheater. She had no idea, to get her keys and her purse from his place, and walks in on the scene. So then King's like, fuck, I have to take care of her. But he doesn't want to, and so he takes her, and she's captive with him for a little bit, and then he's like, you know how to fix this? We're getting married. And then it's off to the races from there. She's not having it. She's not having any of it, and she gave him so much shit, and it was so great. And then Dom, third book in the series. I love that unhinged man. He's so unhinged. He has manipulated this girl, Val, into being with him. Val is King's sister because Dom wants in on the Alliance. And he basically makes Val fall in love with him, unbeknownst to her that the whole reason for it is that he wants to be in the Alliance, and she doesn't find out until they're on King's doorstep to tell him that she's moving with Dom, and Dom gets punched in the face, and King's like, what the fuck are you doing with my sister? What's going on? And Val's like, how do you know my brother? And then everything explodes and shit just goes on from there. It's a great time. Gave that one 4.5 stars. And then Hans I gave 4 stars, mostly because after Dom being such a high, Hans was not, and I really struggled with it initially, but it's so well done. This is one of the times that I wish I had happened upon the books as they were releasing so that I had a break between them to kind of forget the rush of energy that they gave me. And it's not that Hans is bad, it's just written so differently from the other ones, and I was not prepared for, because Hans is not your stereotypical mafia man the way the other 3 are, and when you go into it expecting that, it just doesn't work. He's more of like a hitman, vigilante situation. He's got this heartbreaking past that is his driving motivation for what he does today. And he also has this hot neighbor across the street who bakes him terrible things, and he always eats them, and he keeps the little sticky notes she writes telling him what the things are. And she unfortunately gets mixed up in his life of crime, and things go from there. Steamy hot things go on from there, and also just a lot of healing and love in a way I was not expecting from a dark romance. It was a great time. If you're thinking about reading this series, I definitely recommend it, but I would say, like, I would not recommend, like, binging them all in one weekend like I did. I would give some space, at least between Dom and Hans, just a little bit. And then I did one of my favorite things. I was trying to stave off reading Lost and Lassoed by Lila Sage, and so I picked up Dust Storm and Downpour by Maggie Gates. So good. Fireline comes out next month, and I can't wait. These books are so good. This is the Griffith Brothers series. The first one, Dust Storm, is like a single dad, almost, I guess, workplace romance, technically. Christian's a single dad. He helps run the Griffith family ranch with his brothers and some of his best friends. And Cassandra Parker is a marketing whiz, but also kind of like a fix-it woman. She gets into a lot of shit at her job, her fiance, and I think his dad runs the company, but they decide, like, hey, you need to cool off. We need to separate you from the client that you just had the blow up with, and you're going to go to this ranch in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and help them figure out more streams of income for their ranch, figure out all the shit. You're going to work there for the next however long until things calm down. Number one, she's unhappy out of it. Number two, her fiance is shady as fuck, okay? Hate that man. Number three, Christian is all she ever needed and more. He's great. He's absolutely great. I also really love the choice to make his daughters older in this. They're in, I think, 3rd and 5th grade in this book. And I feel like normally when you get a single dad romance, the kid's either like an actual baby, a toddler, or maybe 4 or 5 years old, but they're usually fairly young. And I liked the choice of not only making them older, but kind of getting this twist in here, because it just made everything else that happened along the way that much sweeter. I also love that Cassandra was not the stereotypical maternal FMC that popped in for this. It made it that much more endearing when you would watch her do things for the girls that you knew deep down she like normally would not do and low-key hated. It was great. Very much a I don't like kids, but I like your kids situation. And then Downpour deals with Christian's brother Ray, who was a cocky bull rider who had a awful fall and maybe trampling and ends up paraplegic. And he has fired literally every home health aide who has come in to try to help him. His family's at their wits' end. And the last one who comes in is terrible at her job. Actually, I take that back. She's good at her actual job. She's terrible at being at her job on time. She forgets details all the time. And she's a little bit of a hot mess, but so is Ray. But the one thing she does do is keep his family out of his house, off his back, and give him space to just kind of deal, which is all he's ever wanted since the accident. He's just wanted space. He doesn't want to be looked at with a lot of pity and dealing with that, and she does a great job of supporting him through that and in other ways too. Gave that 5 stars, had the best time, and then I did. I no longer had the will to wait until September to read Lost and Lassoed like I had planned, so I read it in June, and I don't regret it. I couldn't wait for Gus and Teddy any longer, and I will be rereading it. I will. Probably the week that it releases. It comes out in November. But my God. So girl, you really did your big one with this one. I've been waiting for Gus and Teddy since like chapter 2 of Done It. She did not miss the banter, the where the fuck are these feelings coming from? Why do I feel the thing? The reluctant support Gus accepts from Teddy when she becomes his daughter's nanny through the book is perfect. If you have read the series, you already know that Gus and Teddy have been a simmering volcano since book 1. And we've been waiting for them to erupt, and erupt they did. But not in the way that you would expect. And I won't be sharing why, because that would be a major spoiler. Just know that the 2 strong ones have come together, okay? Gus is the strong one in his family. Teddy's the strong one out of her and her dad. And she's the strong one for Gus's sister, Emmy. And the 2 strong ones have come together, and it's so good. I want to say more, but this book just literally doesn't come out till November, and I don't want to spoil anything. But if you're even the least bit interested, pre-order it. If you, for some reason, didn't like Done and Dusted, which number 1, what's wrong with you? But 2, fine, whatever. Come back and try this one. Okay. Swift and Saddled is out right now. That came out at the beginning of the summer, maybe in spring. That's book 2. And follows Wes and Ada. That was great. Had a great time with that book. I think I talked about it in May. So you have something to tide you over until then. And then because I just couldn't cowboy enough, I reread Heartless by Elsie Silver. It's Kate and Willa, and they're great, and it was still 5 stars. I found more passages to highlight. Didn't think that would happen. My Kindle's like, are you sure? You highlighted this page already. I'm sure. Very hot single dad nanny romance, but more than that, it's tender. And the found family aspects of the Chestnut Springs series bring me to my knees every time. Absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. You know what? This next book caught me by surprise. This is my first book of July. It's The Next Best Fling by Gabriela Gomez. I normally hate a love triangle, quadrangle, whatever shape the fuck it is, but I loved this. I ate this shit up. So we follow Marcella, who's a librarian, and the book opens with her sitting at dinner with a man, showing her a ring, and you're like, oh my god, she's getting engaged. Oh my god, this is so exciting. What a way to start a book. Wrong. This is her best friend, her male best friend, who she's had a crush on and actually went on a couple dates with in college, showing her the ring that he wants to give her ex-best friend, who is his girlfriend and soon to be fiance. And she's like, wow, she's gonna love that. Oh my god, it's great. Can I leave now and go cry? Oh my god. So she's dealing with that. At the engagement party, she runs into his brother as he is kind of drunk out by the bathrooms, pacing, going over his speech to tell his brother's new fiance that he's been in love with her for years and wants to give it a go. And Marcella, while knowing that that would be really beneficial for her if she wanted to get with, I think his name was Ben, she's like, this is not the way to do it, and not in front of their family and their friends and all of that. So she tells Theo, hey, you cannot do this here. You can't do this right now. Your brother will literally never forgive you. Come on, let's go. And she takes him back to her place just to like let him lay on the couch and like sleep off his alcohol. Well, they show up the next morning at a planned brunch that was more of like an intimate party for like close friends and family following the big engagement party. And they show up together and everyone assumes that they've hooked up. Ben immediately sees red and he's like, what the fuck are you doing with my brother? Like, you need to be careful. This is not it. Absolutely not. And his fiance is kind of giving her that, like a little bit of like, hey, be careful. But then she also is like low-key rooting for it. And it's like a thing. And things kind of go off from there. So there's a consistent kind of love triangle, quadrangle, I guess quadrangle because there's 4 thing going on. But then there's the underlying thing of Theo and Marcella, and Theo doing the sweetest things for her. And them like trying to kind of hooking up but not, but then deciding to, and it's like a lot of back and forth. And in the descriptor of that just sounds like a bunch of drama, but it was so good and so worth it. I can't recommend it enough. I had a great time. I was very surprised because those are things that I normally would not like, but I had the best time with. So after that, I read Walkoff Wedding by Maren Moore. Gave that 5 stars, a 3rd book in the Orleans University series. And this was following Grant and Addie. Grant and Addie meet on a message board for their college. They don't know each other's actual names. She calls him like Jock Boy or something, and he calls her Art Girl. And I think Art Girl was actually her actual screen name on there. Eventually they do meet, and it's because they met at a party, not realizing who each other were. Addie was sitting out on like a balcony or like back deck area sketching, and she leaves her sketchbook and races home as soon as the clock strikes midnight, very Cinderella. And Grant finds her sketchbook and wants to get it back to her, but doesn't know her name. Her name's not in the book. And so he puts out, his friend convinces him to put flyers everywhere saying like, hey, if this is your sketchbook or whatever, like, let's, get this back to you. But he also realizes while looking into it that it is Art Girl's sketchbook, but does not put 2 and 2 together that Addie was the one that had it because she wasn't using it while he was with her out there. It was just kind of like on the deck next to her. And so he figures out that it belongs to Art Girl, puts his flyers out like, Art Girl, here, I have your notebook or whatever, signed Jock Boy, and is trying to find her to get it back to her. Finds it, realizes she's the girl from the party, and shit just goes off from there. What we learn leading up to that is that Addie is being forced to marry this slime ball of a sleazy Nepo baby by her stepfather because he has told her that their bakery is going under, and the bakery is the last thing that she has of her mother who passed a while back. And that by marrying this sleazeball, his family is going to fund the bakery essentially and save it and blah, 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 blah. She absolutely does not want to. He makes her physically uncomfortable. It is very clear that he has no problems threatening to hurt her, and likely probably would once they are alone together. And so she's trying to find a way out of this scenario, enter Grant, and things just kind of go on from there. This was one of the sweetest romances I think I've ever read. It is a sports romance, but there's very little sports in it, so if that's not your thing, I think you would still really enjoy this. I loved them. The way that they cared for each other. There's some teach me moments in it, so if you like that in your spicy romances, that's a thing. But also just the way that Grant just repeatedly showed up for her when no one else really had in her life. She does have like some like pseudo uncles who like worked at the bakery that absolutely love her and would do anything for her, but outside of them, Addie's never really had anyone in her corner. She's never really had friends or anything. And so what Grant brings to her life, and in addition his teammates and their girlfriends, was so special. And getting to see her learn what it's like to just be like genuinely loved on by the people around you was really sweet. Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit to Play Along by Liz Tomford. I gave that 5 stars. And I was very annoyed that I gave it 5 stars in the end. And what I mean by that is I have a love-hate relationship with the Windy City series. When I first read, I think the first one's called Mile High, I did not realize that the FMC in that was supposed to be black. I thought she was just a plus-size FMC. And so I was like, okay, fine, whatever. And then halfway through the book, I realized that she's supposed to be black. And just what I mean by that is so much of her character her character behavior in certain scenarios that happened did not fit what I would expect from a black FMC, like in her reactions. And I don't mean that like black women are all supposed to react the same way, because we don't. We're not a monolith. But I do, in talking obviously to other people, know that we generally have the same reactions to things, but we may not outwardly express it that way. But there wasn't that back like inner monologue of that either, if that makes sense. Like there wasn't that, I couldn't do this because I need to not lose my job, but my god, that motherfucking like whatever, just like in your head, and like the way you would think about things and react to things just wasn't there. And I really struggled with that. And then in The Right Move, you follow the brother who is black in that situation, but he's like not so much the focus. It's Indy, the female main character, and she's white. So it was like, that was fine. I DNF'd Caught Up. I'm sorry, but I'm not. It just wasn't good. It was boring. That's what it was. It wasn't that it wasn't good, because her writing is great. That's the thing. One thing, Liz Tomford does a great job writing. But I was so bored by Miller, I couldn't, because it was just the same thing of her over and over again, like saying the same thing. And I was just like, are we progressing the story forward? Is anything gonna freaking happen? And it just felt like nothing was. And so I just kind of gave up on it. But then my best friend was like, you need to read Play Along. I read it one sitting. It was phenomenal. You need to read it. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then Chandler Ainsley, who she and I have very similar tastes when it comes to our sports romances, was like, yeah, I ate this shit up. This was so good. And I was like, god damn it. I was like, if even Chandler liked it, then that means it was good. It was fucking good. It was really good. So it follows Isaiah and Kennedy, who we meet in Caught Up. Well, we meet Isaiah earlier than that, but we meet Kennedy in Caught Up. She's the team's trainer, one of them, like the team of doctors that works there. And Isaiah's had a thing for her since she started, but she was engaged when she started. So he would flirt, but he was respectful of the fact that, like, this is a taken woman. I stand no chance. But then he finds out that her engagement is off. And at that point, all bets are off. Isaiah is putting it on thick. He's trying everything he can with her, and she's like, absolutely not. I can't date you. I can't fraternize with players. Also, just no, I'm not interested. Until they end up in Vegas together, preseason, running into each other. She's there for her, I think, half-sister or stepsister's bachelorette, and he's there with the boys from the team, some of them, on just a preseason trip bonding situation. They end up spending the night together, walking through Vegas, having dinner, getting very, very drunk, and they get married, and everything kind of spills out from there. We learn about the history of Kennedy's employment with the team and why she is so adamant about keeping her boundaries. That was sad and infuriating and a lot of things. And then we also find out through Kennedy that Isaiah has been sprung this whole time, and nothing about this is fake for him. And the whole time she's like, no, we're doing this so I don't lose my job and for all sorts of other reasons, but this has an expiration date. And he's like, sure, babe, sure it does. This was so much. It was healing, it was steamy, it was fun, it was funny, it was a lot of things. It was tender, it was great. There was some really great anxiety rep in this as well. I had a great time. Okay, my battery died, but I am back. So let's talk about Homebound by Meredith Trapp. This actually comes out August 8th, so by the time this is posted, it will come out that following Thursday. I loved her first book, Icebound, and she is back. This time with a small town romance. Yeah, I wouldn't call this a cowboy romance, but small town. We follow Dakota, who's a female bull rider, trying to make it onto whatever the big bull riding circuit is. I forget the name of it. And Wyatt, who we actually met in the first book. He's a hockey player in Nashville, but is home for the summer and before preseason starts, just trying to help his parents with their tulip farm. Actually, maybe it's just like a flower farm in general, but I know there's for sure tulips. And it's him and his little 18-year-old daughter, Vienna, in tow, just there to be. But he also is trying to make amends with Dakota because a few years ago he left her after finding out she got engaged. He just kind of ghosted her, honestly, which was very hurtful for her. They never had a romantic relationship, but he was the one person she felt like she had a truly honest relationship with outside of her dad. And to lose her best friend like that suddenly and seemingly for no reason was very hurtful for her for obvious reasons. In Wyatt's case, though, he's been in love with her since he was a literal child and has never told her, has never made a move, and has always tried to be respectful of her, but then also just suffered while she would date around. And after she got engaged, he kind of went on a slew of one-night stands and got a girl pregnant despite using protection, and she didn't want to be a mom, and he was like, hey, that's fine, but I would love to keep the baby, so if you would just do the hard part, I will help you through that, and then I will take her after she's born. And so it's him raising his daughter, Vienna. His parents actually left Texas, and Dakota's been looking after their farm so that they can live in Nashville with him during season and help take care of his daughter, because obviously as a hockey player, he is gone multiple times a week during season, and that's not conducive to a baby and their sleep schedules and all of those things. So his moms help him raise his daughter. And so they're back for the summer, checking on the farm and all sorts of things. And so he is sharing the barn that's been like renovated into a living space with Dakota and has taken the second bedroom. And at first things are very icy. Dakota's like, listen, I forgive you for leaving, but I'm still mad at you. Like, this is not, we're not just going to go back to being the way things were before. And he's like, okay. He's trying so hard initially, and he's so sweet and such a golden retriever that it's so hard not to forgive him. And she basically immediately kind of melts into that, and they kind of slowly start to dip back into being the best of friends. And her best friend's like, Wyatt Patterson has grown up. You mean you've never felt anything for that man? And she's like, no. What do you mean? That's my best friend. Like, ew. He's like a brother to me. I would never. And she's like, sure. I'm calling it. You guys will be knocking boots by the end of the summer. Like, it's gonna happen. And she's like, no, that's never gonna happen. Well, Wyatt is determined to make her his. He's determined. And so he has enlisted the help of one of his friends from his hockey team, trying to talk him through like ways to get her to see him differently, and that he's not the little 8-year-old boy she rescued out of the river. And so we just watch him woo her, and her realizes like, oh shit, like, okay, my best friend's kind of hot, and also when did I start feeling this way about him? And it also was really sweet watching her fall for his daughter first. That was honestly the weight of his heart, but then also not realizing for her that that was how he was going to burrow back into hers, because she's obsessed with his daughter basically immediately. And even when she was mad at him, she was like, you didn't do anything to deserve this. Like, I'm still going to help take care of you. And she's just so sweet to her, and like would randomly come home with like stuffed animals for her, or like think of things that might help her with her teething. It was just very, very sweet. Like I said, this is a slow burn. I think they kiss at like the 60% mark maybe, but it is not for a lack of tension and other things going on leading up to that. And if anything, you get to see just their supportive nature towards each other as things are moving forward. And so it didn't really feel like I was waiting for the romance to happen. I felt like it was slowly building as we got to the actual physical side of things. So if slow burn's not necessarily your thing, I would say still give this a shot, because this book is short. So even though it is a slow burn because the chapters move so fast, it took me, I don't know, a couple hours to get to. I had a great time. And then last but not least is a book from my absolute favorite series of all time, the Playing for Keeps series. I read book 4, Fall With Me by Becca Mack. And I read this on the last day of July. This was my 100th book of the year, and I intentionally waited once I realized that like I could time it up that way, because this book came out on the 30th, and I was like, I will read this on the 30th and the 31st, and that will be my 100th book. And sure enough, it was. This follows Jackson Riley, who is the newest teammate on the Vancouver Vipers. He's been there for about 2 years. And Carter, Garrett, Emmett, and Adam have brought them into their friend group since honestly he got there, but he was really reluctant to kind of join in because he went all in his last teams and tried to be a part of the friend groups and be at the family barbecues and do all the things. But as soon as he would get traded, it was like those relationships didn't exist anymore. When he would reach out, it'd be like a "who's this" text would come back, which is very hurtful. And so he's like, fine, if no one's gonna miss me when I leave, then I may as well not do that all over again. So like he's shown up for the things, but he's always kind of had one foot out the door. And then we meet Lennon. Lennon becomes a team photographer, but not before she spends an absolutely wild night in Cabo with Jackson. She's supposed to be there on her honeymoon, but she didn't get married. She takes the trip anyway, and they are in bungalows next to each other, where she hears him absolutely railing this Puck Bunny whose name he can't remember for almost an entire week. And when they're not fucking, they're fighting. And she, at one night, is just kind of over it. She's sitting on the balcony, and he's fighting with the girl he brought, and he can't even get her name right. And Lennon's kind of laughing at him. And then he is like, well, if you're going to check me out, you may as well come over here. And she's like, as if, and goes back into her bungalow. They meet up at the bar when he like walks in and sees her sitting there, and she's so annoyed by him. And they get very drunk, and then they spend a magical night together. And she thinks, great, a nice one night stand to close the chapter of my life. And she had taken the job in Vancouver. She was moving after she got back from that trip. And they never really told each other, I don't know if they even told each other their names. Actually, I take that back. I think they did, but like not last names. Like, they didn't talk about any details. It was very much just instant fire chemistry and then move on from there. She leaves before he wakes up. They don't have each other's numbers, none of that. So he's back in Vancouver. It's like a week or two later. They're in preseason. They're skating around or whatever. And Carter's like, did you hear, like, Tim left? There's rumors that he was cheating on his wife, and, like, that's why he left. And then someone else is like, no, his wife's mom's sick. They, like, moved to go help her. Like, what are you doing? And, you know, the normal team banter we've had for the last 3 books that's super fun. I will say, I was laughing through the first, like, 60% of this book almost every page. And not like inside chuckling, like outwardly chuckling, to the point where there were points where I was reading this book in public and people were turning around looking at me like, what is so funny? And I'm like, sorry, this book I'm reading is hilarious. I was having the best time. But they see each other and Lennon's like, I'm gonna be sick, and like, darts out of there, which is hilarious. And Jackson's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's definitely her. Oh shit. And they kind of have this moment. Long story short, they end up roommates. Roommates, if you will, because they kind of act like they can't stand each other. But Lennon has a pipe burst or something in her apartment. It's like uninhabitable, and she was gonna stay at a hotel, but she's at like this family skate day for the team, and she's like there taking photos, and they have snacks, and she goes into anaphylactic shock because she's allergic to tree nuts and another kind of nut. And Jackson actually found that out during vacation, that she was allergic to certain things, and he's the only one who realizes like basically immediately what's happening, because everyone else is like, are you okay, like what's going on? And he like immediately jumps to help her after ignoring her basically the whole day, trying to pretend like he does not have the hots for this girl. And finds her EpiPen, gives it to her, gets her to the hospital, and then stays at the hospital. And the nurse is like, you really shouldn't be driving, you need rest, whatever. And so he goes to drive her, and she's like, just take me back to my car. Sees all the stuff in the car, and he's like, okay, come stay with me. It's just for one night, it's fine. So for some reason, all the hotels are booked. I think they said it was a Harry Styles concert, which like fair. And so she stays, and then she low-key just never leaves. And you watch them slowly thaw to each other. The attraction never left. It never left. But Jackson likes to pretend that he was destined to be alone in this life. There are great scenes with his cat Mittens that we met in Unravel Me in book 3. There are fun photo shoots with Mittens and Lennon. It's very cute. This book was deeply emotional in the way that all of Beck Mac's books are, but because this one was so funny for most of it, it kind of smacks you in the face a little bit later, but is so incredibly sweet. This is actually, I think, the shortest book of all of hers. This one's only 448 pages, which is crazy to say out loud because most romance books are like 350, but Beck Mac is known for writing really long books, and you're either along for the ride or not. That's just how it is. This was a full 5 fucking stars. I had the best time. Jackson and Lennon are so sweet. I absolutely loved them. Watching them learn to love themselves and then each other, so deeply emotional, but also just incredibly sweet and funny and steamy and sexy and all the fun things. So if you were looking for a book to dive into, that's it. Although Becca Mack is no longer an indie author anymore, she did retain the rights to the ebook, so all of her ebooks are still on Kindle Unlimited. And if you don't have KU, they're still relatively cheap. They're not at the crazy publisher price. I think they're $3.99. Get into it. Thank you so much for sitting through this marathon, absolute marathon of a recap. I hope you found some books that sound interesting to you for you to read. If you've read any of these, talk to me about them in the comments. Did you love them? Did you hate them? Are you thinking about giving them another go? Let's talk about it. And in the meantime, happy reading. I will see you in another video soon.